Coming up on this episode of One-on-One Sports.
I sit down with two of our experts to talk about the best rivalries in sports.
Rio's issues for the Summer Olympics are brought to the forefront in our lounge.
And the recent NBA and the upcoming NHL trade deadline are dissected by our experts.
All that and so much more.
And it all starts
right now. Welcome to One-on-One Sports. I'm Connor Delphi.
And I'm Jerry Kimball. Here's the starting five.
This year's NBA trade deadline may not have lived up to the hype, but that's not to say there weren't their fair share of rumors. One of which being the deteriorating relationship between Houston Rockets stars Dwight Howard and James Harden. According to the Bleacher Report, Howard and Harden have been making efforts to get the other player traded away ever since the heartbreaking first-round playoff exit to the Portland Trail Blazers in 2014. So who's to blame for this faulty relationship?
It's the Houston management, and this frustrates me, honestly, because in the beginning of the season, when they were in 4-7, they fired they fired Kevin McHale, their head coach. Which was ridiculous. They made it to the conference finals last year, and then on top of that, they brought in Ty Lawson, who can't work with this team at all, and now they're going to get rid of him.
I think ultimately Dwight Howard is the problem here. To be clear, no player is unfaultworthy in this. Harden didn't take a leadership role in the team. Yeah. Dwight Howard's had attitude issues, but Dwight Howard has labeled himself this league as a team wrecker. He's been doing more harm than good, just like he did in LA with the Lakers. And so at this point, I don't see him giving enough up to this team to garner any respect or why he shouldn't be dealt. I think he's the root of the problem.
He's a clubhouse cancer, honestly. And then they have a problem with Monty Eunice now as well. They have to pay the luxury tax now.
Exactly.
It's awful in Houston. During the 1980s and 1990s, the NBA was known for its physical style of basketball. However, the league isn't like it used to be, according to some former players. NBA Hall of Famer Gary Payton recently said, "I could never play basketball in this soft era. All of my contract money would go towards fines." Connor, has the NBA become too soft, and how can you fix it?
Yes, a million times yes.
Yeah,
in the 80s and 90s, there was no talk about flopping, and now it's all we can seem to talk about whether there's a questionable foul. So I don't think there's a question of whether it's gotten too soft. Yes, there are a couple hotheads and some bruisers in the league right now, your DeMarcus Cousins said, but there were 15 of those in the NBA, and that was the entire Detroit Pistons team. You couldn't go down the lane without getting fouled hard.
Yeah, what a technical foul or a flagrant foul is now wasn't what it was then. They changed the rules a lot. And it's a very soft era. I totally agree with Gary Payton. A little bump nowadays, the referees are going to call it.
More.
And look at the Warriors. They're taunting everybody, and they don't get anything from it at all.
Couldn't agree more. Barry Bonds continues to be denied a spot into the Baseball Hall of Fame due to his connections to performance-enhancing drugs. However, the 7-time National League MVP and all-time home run leader still believes that he should already be enshrined, saying, quote, "In my heart and soul and God knows, I'm a Hall of Famer," end quote. So should a player like Barry Bonds?
No, you don't even have to finish the question.
For it.
If you cheat on a test and you get caught, do you still get a good score?
This is comical.
Do you still get a good score on that test?
Not baseball teacher.
No, you get a 0.
Keep going.
And I think that the Hall of Fame should be for clean, hardworking
baseball players.
baseball
Oh, that's so
players.
funny, Jared. That is so funny. Gaylord Perry, he's in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
What'd he do? Doctored baseballs. He asked Vaseline for an endorsement because he used baseball so much. The legend Babe Ruth, do you know what he tried to do in 1925? Inject himself with testosterone. Barry Bonds, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the steroids. This was not deemed the highest sin in baseball. At the time he did it, frankly, the league didn't do much to discourage it in 2000s when he was doing it.
But listen, there's guys out there that did stuff on basically nothing. Babe Ruth lived on hot dogs and beer all his life.
And testosterone.
And
Barry Bonds was dominant. It would be one thing if he wasn't one of the greatest hitters in the era with all the steroids. He's doing loads better. His career WAR is second all time behind who? Barry Bonds. Babe Ruth, excuse me.
Yeah. The University of Miami have offered quarterback prospect Harrison Bailey a scholarship. Nothing too crazy, right? Well, what if I told you that Bailey is currently in the 8th grade? And this isn't the only school offering young players. LeBron James has stated that his 10-year-old son has received 10 offers from schools. Connor, should schools be allowed to offer these scholarships to such young players?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Middle school and growing up, for that matter, is stressful enough. The last thing they need is a college offer, which makes their life even more stressful. These young kids are very impressionable, very impressionable young minds. And so when a college tells them they can have whatever they want, you can come to our school, what are they going to do? They're going to give up on academics and focus just on sports.
You know, I'm not entirely a fan of this, but I think that's how sports is going nowadays. We're getting younger and everything.
That's not okay.
The MLB, they're having running a huge race over this Lazaretto guy who's only 16 years old.
Is that okay, though?
In the EPL, there's guys that play at a young age. There's a guy that played for Chelsea that was 16.
Why follow the
norm,
norm,
In the NBA,
though?
there's rookies
kids.
that are 18 and 19. It's just getting younger, and there's no way to stop it, honestly.
Yes, there is. It's to not do it, not let people recruit people in middle school and give offers. That's a simple thing right here. It's a simple answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge problem with it. I mean, there's a lot of issues that arise from this, but I don't think it's going to change.
For all you diehard Tiger Woods fans, you may want to plug your ears. The Tiger Woods comeback train may be breaking down for good. Golf journalist Robert Lusitich recently reported that Woods' back condition has worsened, and he does not have a set date for a return to the course. Is it time for Woods just to give up and retire?
Look, as long as Tiger Woods can swing a club and walk across that golf course, he's going to be out there and doing so. And if he thinks that he can do that, then why not let him? You know, I know he's going to have a lot of back problems, a lot of issues with injuries after he retires.
Yes.
But if he loves the game and he feels passionate about being there
sometimes
on
you
the
have
court,
to, when you love it, you got to let it go, Jared.
But he's a competitor. He wants to go out there and play. He thinks he can win still. He thinks
he can, but can he? No, I don't think he can. He hasn't won a major in nearly 8 years. For a guy who's basically winning one every year when he was in his prime, that has to be frustrating. Just as frustrating as seemingly losing your swing, which as a horrible golfer, I know how bad it is to slice a ball. And so all of this takes a toll on Tiger Woods. And I personally, if he's going to have back conditions later when he retires, I personally don't see the benefit of staying in
I think
golf.
if he's enjoying himself, he might as well continue.
But at what cost? That's all the time we have for the quick hitters. Coming up next, our NBA experts take a look back at the trade deadline. Welcome back to One-on-One Sports. The NBA trade deadline came and went with no real star acquisitions, but there were still some moves that could potentially affect many teams' playoff performances and chances. Seated beside me are our basketball experts Kyle Sarazin and Andrew Zung to discuss some of the surprises and letdowns of the trade deadline. So let's start first with what contender benefited the most from their trade deadline move.
So I'm looking at Tobias Harris going to Detroit. And, you know, this isn't going to make them a contender this year because no one is going to be able to dominate the Cleveland Cavaliers in a 7-game series.
But I mean, they also aren't a contender since they're 28 and 29, so they're under 500. But I do agree that Tobias Harris
I'm looking down the
helps.
road here. I'm looking down the road. And, you know, Andre Drummond, great player. And this NBA that we're in right now is a 4-out, 1-in system. You got your 1-in with Andre Drummond. You got a guy who's shooting over 30% from 3 in Tobias Harris. Only 15 power forwards in the NBA can do that. And I'm looking down the road. He's under contract till he's 26 years old. I really think that you would go out and you sign a small forward, put Stanley Johnson coming off the bench.
And you have more potential with that too, where you can develop. The team that I'm looking at is the Clippers right now with getting Jeff Green. They're more of a contender right now. And if you remember Jeff Green a few years ago when he played under Doc Rivers with the Celtics, he averaged 17.6 points per game. Even though he won't need that type of impact here, he'll be able to help out and spell out problems with people on the role
That's
players.
great, no, but they're not going to be able to compete with Golden State. They're not going to be able to compete with San Antonio.
I think that Tobias Harris is a steal. I don't know why the Orlando Magic gave him away, but right now the contender is the Clippers, which is why the Jeff Green trade works here, but look out for the Pistons a couple years down the road for sure. So which team failed to make the trade deadline move that they needed to?
I think it was the Houston Rockets, and not just that the trade didn't end up going through because of the injury with Mati Hunis. I think the biggest thing is they didn't trade Dwight Howard, and that they need to get more pieces to the puzzle, especially with not having as many high-level draft picks that they're going to have in the future. They need to surround James Harden with better talent, and that just didn't come now. And losing assets is going to hurt.
That's huge because I'm looking at Atlanta, who is in the same situation. They're going to let a guy like Al Horford walk. They could have gotten a
The thing is, though,
boatload
I
for
don't
him.
know if he's going to actually walk when it comes here after how long he's played in Atlanta. And you don't know with Atlanta. They've been really dedicated to the system Budenholzer's put in. And that's why it looked like they weren't going to trade him, because they're thinking about keeping him and that they wanted to see how it goes for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Rockets on this one. Dwight Howard has been a trouble for that team since the day he got there. We actually talked about it earlier in the quick hitters. But last question here, which team will sign an impact free agent with that open roster spot?
So I look at Golden State Warriors. I'm looking at Anderson Varejao. You know, Golden State was rumored before the deadline to want someone inside they can pair with Festus Ezeli. Festus Ezeli coming off the bench, Anderson Varejao coming off the bench. Someone who can protect the
Varejao
rim.
helps too with the injuries that Ezeli and Bogut can have.
Also,
and you don't need to have Draymond Green playing the 5 as much. That would be a great signing. I'm looking at the Dallas Mavericks, and Mark Cuban's always trying to make an addition to make the Dallas Mavericks better. He likes veterans, and that's why I'm thinking someone like David Lee. You need some more people down low to help out with Dirk Nowitzki. And obviously Zaza Pachulia's had a great year, but besides for those two guys, when it comes to the playoffs, you need Dirk to be healthy for this team to have an upset chance at a round to maybe advance. and David Lee will be able to help with Dirk and limit the minutes.
David Lee is a great player and all, but Golden State to get something that
But
they
I mean,
need,
the thing is, though, Golden State it's in a different situation. We're just looking at the free agents that they could get, and Verjau's a great one. And obviously, they had David Lee, but they're looking more at a center where you would say the Mavericks have their center with Pachulia, and it's not that Verjau would really be as much of a fit since he wants to guaranteed chase the ring with the best team in the NBA, which is the Warriors. And
to get that player inside, to complement Azalea, to complement Bogut, and it's just huge for them. Just another way they can stop Kevin Love. Another way they can stop the Kevin.
Any addition to the Warriors that's going to help them inside is going to help them in the playoffs, where they've been perfect so far, basically. But everything can change in the playoffs. That's all the time we have for this trade deadline review. But we have another one coming up as our NHL experts head to the ice.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning, 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash, 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
No thanks, Dad. I got it.
Okay. I'm gonna go fix the lamp in your room.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.
The NBA trade deadline came and went with a very uneventful day, but no need to fear as the NHL trade deadline is coming up next Monday, and it'll be shaping up to be a good one. Our NHL experts, Cam and Tim, will each propose 2 trades that they believe should go down at the deadline, and then we will look at the impact of them. So first up, Cam, what's your first trade?
So my first trade is the Anaheim Mighty Ducks trading a first-round pick to the Carolina Hurricanes for Eric Staal. And this makes sense for both teams. For Carolina, they can get away of Stahl's huge contract. He's definitely, moving towards past the prime of his career. And then for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, formerly Mighty Ducks, I keep doing that. I love the Mighty Ducks.
It's hard.
Best name in sports, best jerseys back then, too.
Yeah, best name, best jerseys, whatever. Anyway, they need Eric Staal. He's a great piece. He might be what they need to put them over the top and get them back into cup contention. They've been kicking around for a few years. I think this deal makes sense for both teams.
I like it a lot for both teams. Like it. Give a solid piece to the Ducks and the Carolina Hurricanes, full-on rebuild mode. Get that first round pick.
Oh, yeah. You get the first-round pick, and then they free up all sorts of money from Eric Stahl's contract to go out and get some.
So my first trade, going to another team that can contend this year, and that's the Florida Panthers. And I have them trading Brandon Peary and a second-round pick to the Winnipeg Jets for Andrew Ladd. Now, Ladd's contract's up in the air, so this is purely a rental. But from Florida's perspective, you're 5 points up in the Atlantic. Go all in this year. Go all in. Get this guy. He can be a first or second line winger. He's a physical presence. He can score goals in the playoffs. He brings leadership. They're a young team with the exception of Yager. So I think that's great. And then for the Winnipeg Jets, I know Peary would be a little bit of a risk because he's on short-term IR. But, he's a good young prospect, and you get a second-round pick.
Peary's a great player. I really like him. He's been banged up. What scares me is you're trading away the face of that franchise right now. That's the
Contract's
captain
up,
of the
though.
team.
It's up at
They
the end
could
of the
re-sign
year.
him. They might work
There's
it
no
out. They might
guarantee
work
that
it out.
he's going
But
to. You
just
gotta get something for
the
him,
PR
Cam.
with that, it's a great trade for Florida. A little bit more shaky on Winnipeg's end, from my perspective. My second trade, I'm trading Jimmy Howard from the Detroit Red Wings for Yuri Hudler of the Calgary Flames. Now, don't stop me here. Don't stop me. I have a reason for this. So Calgary needs a goaltender, right?
Of course, yeah.
Detroit wants to get rid of Jimmy Howard. They will 100% have to eat some of his contract. I get that. I understand that. But this makes sense for both teams. If they see the potential that Jimmy Howard has, the goaltender that we saw when he was so good and carrying that Detroit team, and then the Red Wings get another very talented forward in Yuri Hudler. Yuri Hudler's having a down year. His stock's down. I think this trade could go through and make sense for both teams.
Cam, they're going to have to eat a lot of that contract. He has 3 years at $5.5 million a year left on it. He's 31 years old, and he's been absolutely awful.
Awful's a strong word.
I don't see them interested in that trade. I see them more, if they're going to acquire a goalie, I see them more getting like a younger guy like James Reimer from Toronto.
I'm just thinking if they could get Detroit to eat $3 million of that contract, I think they could take it. And then that frees up still, that Detroit gets that contract
It's a bit of
which
a
is what they
stretch,
want.
though. It's a bit of a stretch.
It's a stretch, but I think
my
it
final
makes sense.
trade, this is also could be a little bit of a stretch. It's the Arizona Coyotes trading their star young forward, Michael Bodker, to the Ottawa Senators for defenseman Cody Ceci and a second-round pick. And, you look at the Arizona Coyotes, they don't want to pay him. He's a restricted free agent at the year, and they've said repeatedly they don't want to pay the money he's looking for. Ottawa, this would make them much better. Offensively, he's a stud. It'll make them a good player. And Ottawa, last year, I know they're 6 points out of the playoffs, but last year they were 14 points out of the playoffs.
This makes sense for both teams
It does.
for a lot of reasons. Bodker would be great in Ottawa. And then Cody Ceci is a pretty good young player. You throw in the draft pick. I think it's a good trade for both
Ottawa's
teams.
not afraid to trade at the deadline. The NHL trade deadline may not end for another week, but the deadline for this block has arrived. Next up, Connor goes to the lounge with our experts on the upcoming Summer Olympics.
Welcome back to 101 Sports. I'm your host, Connor Delpreet, and I'm joined in the lounge by Mason Stolf, Thomas Hale, and Tyler Patchen. The Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro will soon be upon us. While the Olympics always bring excitement, this one brings a feeling of concern as well. The emergence of the mosquito-borne Zika virus in Brazil caused the World Health Organization to declare an international health emergency and leave many athletes wondering whether they should even attend the Olympic Games. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts?
All right, I don't think we can have the Olympics in Rio. Zika's going around. This is a disease that just is bad. It shrinks babies' heads from what I've heard. And athletes are worried that once they are done with the Olympics, they might want to have a child and they might contract Zika. And then it's going along with the water. Sailors are saying they're getting rashes when they're getting in the water, rowers and canoers. They're getting all these diseases, just bad symptoms just from the water.
I agree that the Olympics shouldn't be in Rio, but I think this is a decision that should have been made a long time ago, like 8 years ago.
Well, Rio's made these promises
but
to
it's,
clean it
I
up,
mean,
and it's
the
not
Olympics
happening.
are in 4 months now, and regardless of the problems that they have, the athletes have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to compete for their country. They're not going to not go to Rio just because of a couple health concerns. We look at the Beijing Olympics in 2008, the smog was there, but they didn't stop.
Beijing was a completely different situation. Beijing, they made the government forced the city of Beijing to clean, to stop polluting for 3 straight months.
Well, that's what Rio's been planning too, though, but they haven't been making those
steps. But Rio,
steps.
what they've been doing is practically nothing. They've been going out in boats along the coastline and been picking up trash, but that's about it. They haven't gotten down to the water table, haven't done anything. And not to mention, there's still the issue of government corruption, and the president is
Absolutely.
about to be impeached.
You look at Brazil's economy also. Like they tried to jumpstart their economy with the World Cup 2 years ago, and that was an absolute fail. They spent more than any other country ever had, and this is going to set them further back.
Exactly.
But again, I don't think that this is going to have any impact on whether or not the athletes go there, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
I do think, to chime in here, I do think there should be some concern about this Zika virus. The last time that they declared a national emergency was Hurricane Sandy, and then it was Hurricane Katrina, and then it was 9/11. So this is a serious concern. And yes, this might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the athletes, but they do have to think about their own health and
Exactly. They're going to want to come back to compete again. And
I do
they're
think
not
most
gonna
will
risk it all.
go.
I mean, I also think that the serious issue is more for the fans that are going there, because when you have millions of fans that want to travel there, they can be worried about their health because they can only impact them negatively, whereas the athletes, they actually are going to be the ones competing for their nation. But the fans,
right now the Brazilians are, what they're doing is they're actually rolling out the army, with basically tanks of mosquito repellent going into basically the favelas and pretty much every spot in Rio where there's water and just blasting it with chemicals.
But as far as the tourists going into Brazil and say a lot of people contract Zika, they're going to be going back to their home nations, and it can spread even further there. It becomes a big epidemic. It could be a lot worse.
That's the real issue that I'm looking at.
Yeah, right. And that's, when people go home, I mean, people will be scared, but hopefully Brazil wants this to happen. This is their last shot.
And it's going to happen. It's 4 months away. It's not going to.
Yeah, they're not just.
They can't cancel it now. There's nowhere that can host it in 4 months.
But it's pretty clear that there have been some serious issues: government, crime.
This is huge.
They're trying to get the funding to clean it up. It's just not working though. They're not taking bigger steps in this.
As bad as it sounds, I think it's a learning experience.
Exactly.
While it endangers a lot of people's lives, it's a learning experience for the Olympic Committee to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it will certainly be interesting to see whether the virus continues to play a part in the athletes' decision whether to attend the games or not. Up next, Jared and our analysts discuss some of the best sports rivalries.
Now it's time for This Week in Bad Stats.
Bad stats?
Horrible stats. Here goes. 132.
That's how many batters struck out 4 times in one game last season.
Wow, very good. Here's a tough one, though. 3 and 4.
No idea.
That's how many kids witness bullying. 3 out of 4.
That's not a good stat.
No, it's not, but it can change. Kids want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov and give them the tools they need to help prevent bullying.
There are plenty of safe ways kids can help at stopbullying.gov.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Just a week ago, the greatest rivalry in sports occurred as Duke Blue Devils took on the North Carolina Tar Heels in a dramatic battle. While the best college rivalries are obvious, it is still in question of the best rivalries in other leagues. Evan Piercy and Sam Hurd are here to answer that question. So guys, let's start off with the NBA. Sam, who do you have as your best rivalry in the NBA?
Oh, without a doubt, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Boston Celtics. This is a rivalry that has transcended decades. It started with the beginning of the NBA in the 60s. Russell versus Elgin Baylor, what brought the NBA back in the 80s with Bird and Magic, and then was resurrected with Kobe and Pierce in the 2000s.
Yes, that's a good rivalry, but I got to go with the team that ended both those dynasties, and the Detroit Pistons versus the Chicago Bulls back in the late 80s and 90s. This team made Michael Jordan
Can you name any other part of the NBA? Part of the NBA era that had any involvement
This team
with those
defined
two teams?
basketball. The new rules were created because of the physicality they played the game with.
That was a great rivalry, but 16 versus 17, I've got to go with that. Some of the best players in the game. So let's go over to the NFL. Who's your best rivalry ever?
The classic Green Bay Packers versus the Bears, going with 22 combined NFL championships, 5 Super Bowls, and 58 players in the Hall of Fame between the two teams.
That's all fine, but the Bears need to stop being so terrible for that rivalry to have any significance anymore.
They have played 192 meetings, and the
How
Bears
about, what have
lead
you done for me
94
lately?
to 92.
What have you done for me
the
lately?
Bears
This
have
is
the overall
without
series.
a doubt Steelers-Ravens. These are games that are 13-10, 16-13. Since this rivalry started in '96, it's 24 Steelers.
But recently, the Ravens have owned the series. The Bears and
They're all
Packers
close
have been
games.
marking
They're all close games.
They have the rich history. I like this one a little bit more now, so it's a little toss-up. Colts-Pats could get there as well. So we're going to go over to the MLB. This is a big one. Who do you got?
So I'm going for a rivalry of the future. It's Cardinals-Cubs. I know that the Cubs have been terrible for a long time, but now they're back. They're seen as the world's
beyond terrible.
I know, but now they're the pick to be the next World Series champion preseason this year, and the Cardinals are sick and tired of hearing about how good the Cubs are going to be.
Series, though. I mean, I gotta go series.
Not
Dodgers,
in the playoffs.
Giants.
What happened last year in the
Dodgers,
playoffs?
Giants. This team's the longest standing MLB rivalry since 1901. They've played over 2,000 games.
There is no defying the violence and between the fans.
I don't know how you guys left out Yankees Red Sox. That's who I would go. We better wrap up this block now before these two form their own rivalry. We'll be right back with a little tie-in with the upcoming Oscars.
With just under a week until the Oscars begin, we here at 101 Sports think it only makes sense to hold our own sports Oscars. Stephen A. Harris and Rajat Agarwal are here in the studio to read off their winners for some of the top awards. So, Rajat, let's start with you. What's the best sports picture?
I think this is easy because I use the emotional aspect of this. You cannot get sadder and more emotional than We Are Marshall. Just think, you can't argue with the point of the movie, first of all. And then secondly, that speech when he's at the funeral, getting them revved up for the game.
We want to talk about emotional. We got to talk about Coach Carter. This is ragtag group of players from Virginia. All of them from this bad neighborhood. None of them have any plans for the future. And then who comes in and whoops in the shape? Samuel Jackson playing Coach Ken Carter. And it's based off a true story, so it really hits all the heartstrings.
Nate Ruffin walks into the Board of Trustees meeting, opens the curtains. We are
But they
Marshall.
open the gym, and the players still don't want to play because they need to play because they want to be better. It doesn't get any better than that.
Well, you're both wrong.
What do you say?
Remember the Titans.
Ooh.
Far and away the best.
Fair.
All right, so let's start with best athlete actor. Steven?
Mine's a little bit more sarcastic because mine's Dennis Rodman in the movie Simon Says. If you've never seen that movie, it's amazing. He plays a spy named Simon, but Says is spelled S-E-Z. But they never ever say Simon Says. It's just called Simon Says. Dane Cook was his partner. That's amazing. That's it right there.
All right, that is good, but think about this one, all right? He's been in a number of movies. The movies are not great, but Shaq. I mean, the best one was when he partners with Adam Sandler a lot. When he was an officer in, what was it?
Shaq's acting career became invalid after Shazam. That's all I have to say. It's invalid after Shazam.
Good kid.
We're talking about Grown-Ups 2?
Grown-Ups 2.
Not even Grown-Ups. Grown-Ups 2.
Grown-Ups 2.
Oh,
he turns
man.
around,
Sequels are
does
never
this
better.
fantastic dance. He's just a funny guy that you want to see.
Well, I'm going with another basketball player here, and that's Michael Jordan, Space Jam. By far one of the best sports movies of all time.
That is solid.
Now, best supporting actor, Rajat, who do you got?
All right, I'm going with two people. A supporting cast to Michael Jordan, Bugs Bunny and Lola Bunny. That dynamic duo, you cannot beat that. That's like
You
a
can't
love.
go wrong.
No, you
That's
can't
like
beat that. You can't beat that because you know who beats that? Morris Chestnut in Like Mike playing Tracy Reynolds. Because Morris Chestnut, when was the last time you watched a Morris Chestnut movie and weren't just like, man, Morris Chestnut, what a dreamboat. Like, he's great. He's amazing. And he was just this angry old guy who eventually he turns around and he softens up. By who? Because Bow Wow softens him.
Bugs and Lola inspired little kids to.
That was the first Lola Bunny appearance in modern media.
I'm splitting it
so
halfway. I'm going to go with Like Mike, but I'm going to go with a younger thing. Someone that appeals to more kids maybe, and that's Murph from Like Mike.
But everyone wanted to be adopted by Tracy Reynolds after that movie.
I wanted to be Bugs Bunny.
We all had to be honest. Well, we all want to be Bugs Bunny for everything.
All right. Well, it looks like we have another Oscars awards ceremony where Leonardo DiCaprio did not win. Granted, he didn't appear on any sports teams this year. Coming up next, I'll be joined by Jared back at the desk to discuss some of the most lopsided trades in sports history. We've seen it in every team sport where a team makes a trade and 10 years later end up regretting the decision for the rest of their franchise's existence. So Jared, what's the most lopsided trade in sports history?
Oh, hey, I got the best one here. It's when Babe Ruth was traded to the Yankees. And owner Harry Frazee will go down as the worst owner in history. They traded for $100,000 back for Babe Ruth, and it was to help finance his play called No No Nanette. And one of these songs,
Isn't that still on Broadway?
One of the songs in that play was Trip to Mars, and I think that's what Harry Frazee did when he was looking at this trade.
It's a great play on words. I can't argue against that trade. I went from the John Elway trade. He didn't want to play for the Baltimore Colts. He refused. So they traded his rights to the Denver Broncos. So what did he do with the Denver Broncos? Just 5 Super Bowl appearances, third all-time in TD passes. And what he also did was he took a leadership role in the organization afterwards. And I know if he were in Baltimore doing the same thing, you can't really beat Ozzie Newsome as the GM, but he could have helped in some way. And so I think the Baltimore Colts really should have made themselves more presentable as an organization for Elway to want to play with them because clearly the quarterbacks they've had in the past have been, frankly, horrible. So
not a bad trade.
That's all the time we have for this episode of 101 Sports. Huge thanks to our producers, crew, and talent for putting on a great show, and also to you, the viewer, for tuning in.
If you missed anything, be sure to check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 101 Sports. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
Whose side are you?